Welcome to our Sunday school class as we study the Bible together each Sunday. And this is from the Willow Avenue Church of Christ. I'm Houston Bynum. And it's my pleasure to teach on the parables during this quarter. And we have Matthew 13 as our chapter today. And we'll be dealing again with a pair of twin parables. Parable of the tares and parable of the dragnet. Each has a little different perspective from the other. Before we get into this study, I'd like to say something about life in general. If you survey life, whether it's life in the world, life in the church, it's a checkerboard. My daddy's favorite game to play, I believe, was checkers. Not chess, just checkers. The red squares, the black squares. Imagine, if you will, life, as you look at it, is a series of black and red, black and red. Red being the good and the bad being the black. That's the way life looks. Two times the squares. And good and evil, good and bad, exist side by side in this world. People notice the good and they notice the bad. Or sometimes, due to emphasis, someone may focus on just one or the other. I just see the black, the evil, or I see the red, the good. Well, these two parables that we're going to study from Jesus today deal with the coexistence of good and evil. And although good and evil may exist side by side for a time, the theme of this parable is this: eventually there will be a final and a permanent separation between the good and the evil, between the good and the bad. Let's get the parable before us first, and this is Matthew 13, starting in verse 24. Another parable set he before them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man that sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares also among the wheat and went away. But when the blade sprang up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. And the servants of the household came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? Where then has it tares? And he said unto them, An enemy has done this. And the servants say unto him, Will you then that we go and gather them up? And he said, No, lest haply, while you gather up the tares, you root up the wheat with them. Let them both grow together until the harvest. And in time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, Gather up first the tares, and bind them in bundles and burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. Well, that gets the parable before us in just so many words. The interpretation is verses 36 through 43. But let me just wait about our reading of it. So the basic features of the parable: first off, there's an enemy. There was a common practice in the days of Christ to play an evil trick and sow something else in a neighbor's field. In this case, what is being sown is tares. Literally, the word is for darnel grass. It's used 8 times in Scripture, and all 8 occurrences of the word tares occurs in this passage. Now I'll tell you a little bit about bearded darnel. It is a poisonous type of ryegrass. It can cause sleepiness, nausea, convulsions, and death in man and animals. It's a little bit like when you hear of a new product, a new medicine on the market, and it tells you the side effects, and you decide that the side effects are worse than the disease. And you get a little bit hesitant. Well, the side effects of tares, if you were to ingest apparently any part of the plant, it's pretty serious. It is a degenerate wheat. It looks very much like wheat. And in the early stages of growth, it's almost impossible to distinguish it from wheat. As a boy, I remember my dad having a cornfield, and I would look and see some other plant growing with the corn that looked kind of like corn, and it was called Johnson grass. And you know, if you touch Johnson grass, you can get a cut even. It was kind of sharp on the end. And my dad always wanted me to help pull the Johnson grass out of the vegetables, such as corn, that were growing. But it's really difficult sometimes to say, I know that's the plant I want, and that's the weed that I don't want. And there was also the tendency, if you uprooted a weed, you have lost a good plant too that you have disturbed by pulling up the weed. Well, that's evidently the background for this parable in many respects. It's practically impossible to distinguish the tares from the wheat. They look alike. And if you have any effort to pull out the tares, you've messed up the wheat, damaged the good. You don't want to do that. Well, let's look at the interpretation of this parable. And I'll admit as well, the parable of the sower, Jesus gives an interpretation for. The parable of the tares, Jesus gives the inspired interpretation for that. The rest of the parables, I think, are just so simple as to not be easily misunderstood. The point seems to be just rather obvious most of the time. So, let's read from verse 36. Then he left the multitudes and went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, Explain unto us the parable of the tares of the field. And he answered and said, He that sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Okay, he's telling us he's in this parable. And the field is the world. And the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. And the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy that sowed them is the devil. And the harvest is the end of the world. And the reapers are his angels. And therefore the tares are gathered up and burned with fire. So shall it be at the end of the world. The Son of Man shall send forth his angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all things that cause stumbling and them that do iniquity, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous shall shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He that has ears, let him hear. Okay, let's stay with Jesus for the inspired interpretation of this parable. I can't emphasize this enough. The field is the world. The good sower is Christ. The enemy sower is the devil. The good seed are the sons of God. The bad seeds are the sons of the devil. Harvest time is coming at the end of the world. The reapers at the end of the world apparently are the angels, and all of the tares are bundled up and cast into the fires of hell. We read about hellfire in Revelation 19, verse 20, chapter 21, verse 8, Mark 9, verse 44, and Luke 12 and verse 5. And then the righteous are going to shine forth like the sun. I believe that to be the glory of our resurrected bodies. We have no clear concept from Scripture what they'll be like, but we know when we see Him, we shall be like Him, and that's enough for me. And I think it is for you as well. Okay, some people read this and they've got some problems. Let both grow till harvest. Therefore, wicked people in the church are not to be disciplined. Well, the answer is what was meant by the word kingdom in this parable. It said the kingdom was the world. Good and evil coexist side by side in the world. The kingdom is the world here. We're not talking about good and bad in the church. Yes, there are people in the church that'll be lost. Sometimes people accuse us as saying, well, you people in the Church of Christ think you're the only ones that are going to be saved. Well, I read this and other passages, and of course I've got news for that person. Not everybody in the Church of Christ is going to be saved. There are fake Christians, there are hypocrites, and we've got to be genuine. We've got to be sincere with a total heart. And that's very sobering to think about. But again, this particular parable, Jesus said the kingdom is the world. We're talking about good and evil alongside in the world. Well, but what about when it says the angels will gather out of His kingdom? Does the kingdom refer to the church? Well, again, the context, the field where the seed was sown and the field where the seed was harvested are one and the same. Now, in the parable of the pounds, the kingdom includes both the Lord's willing subjects and His enemies. And that's found in Luke chapter 19, verses 12 through 17. Context is so important. We're talking about the kingdom of the world. We're talking about the kingdom of the Lord. The kingdom of the world, Matthew 28, verse 19, all authority has been given unto me in heaven and on earth. The earth is God's footstool, and it is in a sense His kingdom as well, but not specifically His spiritual kingdom, which Jesus prophesied to Peter. I say that you're Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church. The gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. And I'll give to you the keys of the kingdom. Whatever you bind on earth literally shall have already been bound in heaven. And whatever you loose on earth shall have already been loosed in heaven. All of that in the passage, Matthew 16, verses 18 through 19. Okay, church discipline. A person should not run to this passage and say, therefore, you should not, an eldership should not seek to withdraw from anybody because let them both grow together. No, that's not the case. Church discipline does not require support from this passage whatsoever. There are other passages that abundantly teach church discipline, whether it's Matthew 18:15, showing your fault to your brother, and then taking it up a level if you need to. Then 1 Corinthians 5, the adulterous man had his brother's wife, or was it father's wife, in 1 Corinthians chapter 5. Then 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 6, Romans 16, verse 17. A little tract from years ago was titled The Forgotten Commandment, and that was withdrawing fellowship. Whoever wrote that tract was trying to say, this is something that I feel that in the church we have forgotten church discipline, and if necessary, the withdrawal of fellowship when needed. So, the parable of the tares does not prohibit church discipline, nor does it prohibit withdrawal of fellowship, nor does it say you need to root out bad leaven in a congregation. This is talking about the world. And so that's the context of this particular parable. Well, let's look at a few lessons about the tares. The existence of evil. Brother Tom Warren used to say that the problem of evil and human suffering is the strongest argument that the atheist has against the existence of God. Let's just settle this once and for all. The world is not a perfect wheat crop. I love to drive along the highways and see a field that has been planted and is growing up. And one of the prettiest sights in all the world is a growing wheat field when it's newly coming up in that bright green. And one of the prettiest sights as well is a ready to be harvested wheat field that turns that pale yellow and waves of wheat blowing in the wind. It's a beautiful sight. And then you see some Johnson grass right in the middle. Had an interesting thing happen as I was growing up on the farm. One of the farm hands was at the wheat field, and the wheat was ripe, and I noticed he was plucking a head or two off and eating them. I said, "You can eat that?" He said, "Oh yeah, it just tastes like cereal, kind of crunchy cereal." Well, I had to try it too, and it wasn't bad, but I like puffed wheat a whole lot better than straight out of the wheat field wheat. But the world is not a perfect wheat crop. No nation, no state, no county, no city, no town is totally Christian. Although, when I consider Putnam County, we're getting there. There is a church on every corner where we are blessed with numerous congregations. And But no county, not even Putnam County, can we wave a wand or say, we're all Christians. Neither is the most mature congregation all it should be, nor are the best of families all that they could be, thoroughly Christian. It's a perplexing problem that good and evil coexist, and that's a characteristic of life. Jesus put it this way in John 16 and verse 33. In this world you have tribulation, but be of good cheer, I've overcome the world. This world has tribulation. Some of the tribulation is the head knocking between good and evil. And so just to keep that in mind, Jesus admitted it, said this is the way things are, but take cheer, I've overcome the world, and implied, and you can too. Now, another lesson from the tares would have to be outward appearances can be deceiving. You remember that God looks on the heart. Jesse's boys came before Samuel in 1 Samuel 16, verses 6 through 7. They were picking a successor to Saul, or God wanted a successor. And these big strapping brothers came up. Samuel must have thought, surely this is the one. And then the young shepherd David came up. God said, this is the one. Well, he doesn't look like a leader. He's not as big. And God said, God doesn't look on the outward, but he looks on the heart. And how thankful all of us can be that God doesn't judge us on our appearance, but he judges us on the heart, what's on the inside. And then the third lesson from the tares is simply going to be this. Final separation of all good and evil. It will occur when God has passed judgment on the counterfeit wheat, and the angels gather it and burn it in the fires of hell. Okay, we don't have as much time to devote to the Dragnet, but it also has a perspective to share, and it's short. It is verse 47. And the kingdom of heaven is likened to a net that was cast into the sea. I'm still in Matthew 13. And gathered every kind, which when it was filled, they drew it up on the beach, and they sat down and gathered the good into vessels, and the bad they cast away. So shall it be in the end of the world. The angels shall come forth and sever the wicked from among the righteous, and shall cast them into the furnace of fire, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. One of my favorite pastimes through the years has been fishing. I don't get to fish like I used to. And I'm very content to fish from just a pond and sit on the bank and enjoy. If you've got a friend with you, you can solve all the world's problems as you sit there and fish. Unless you've got a friend that wants it totally quiet, we're catching fish. But anyway, they didn't have poles in the first century, apparently. And their fish catching was to cast a net. And the net here The literal Greek word is for a seine, Seine. And you let it down into the water, and you draw it up, and the circumference of that net has hoops, and as you draw the line, it makes the top of it smaller and smaller until you've got a net, and they can pull it up. You remember when Jesus told the fishermen, cast your net on the other side, and they had such a draught of fish, thought the boat might sink. I'd love to see that many fish caught at once, but the semicircle or the circle gets smaller and smaller. The other way, if you're on shore and you cast a net and then you draw a semicircle into shore, that would be another way to catch fish. The Greek historian Herodotus used this same word to describe the device that the Persians cleared a conquered island of inhabitants with this seine, if you will. Well, let's look at an interpretation of the dragnet. The sea is the world. The net is the church. Fishers of men is what we strive to be. Fish are enclosed of every kind, some genuine, some not so genuine. The good fish are the true Christians. The bad fish would be Christians in name only, hypocrites. Both are in the net, both are in the church. And the beach is the end of time. The filled net that God will attain his full purpose. The sorting, that's the day of judgment. The sorters are the angels. Cast the bad away, the wicked are cast into hell. They gather the good into vessels, that's the salvation of the righteous. And the vessels would be parallel to heaven, that the good go to heaven. Let's notice another passage that might be instructive on this, and this is 1 Peter 4, starting in verse 17. For the time has come for judgment to begin at the house of God, and if it begin first at us, what shall be the end of them that obey not the gospel of God? And if the righteous is scarcely saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? Well, judgment beginning at the house of God, the righteous are scarcely saved. Even after we've done all, we're still to consider ourselves as unprofitable servants. We're saved by his grace, unmerited favor. That's the important thing. I have delineated this in other sermons and lessons, but let me just do it very briefly here. Justice means getting what you deserve. You commit a crime, you may be brought before a judge, you may have a fine or a sentence from that judge. That's justice, getting what you deserve. Mercy, not getting what you deserve. The judge says, you're guilty, you deserve this, but I'm going to grant you mercy, and you're not going to get what you deserve. Grace is a whole different level. Getting what you do not deserve. Unmerited favor. You are going to get what you need, God's grace, getting what you did not deserve. So, justice, mercy, and grace, different shades of meaning in all of those. I might share, as we are talking about these matters too, a very sobering scripture of 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 20 through 22, where it says, it's better not to have known the way of righteousness, that after we've known it, to turn away from it. Very sobering for all of us who are Christians. Stay the course. Don't turn away from righteousness. Stay the course. Because for whatever reason, it's better for you never to have known it, to die never having known the truth, than what you've known it, and then to fall away or turn away from it. Well, in the remaining moments, let's look at some lessons about the Dragnet. There will be lost people in the church. James 5, 19 and 20. There are people that are Christians in name only. Their name is in the directory. They occasionally attend. And please note, I'm not talking about the person that is sick or shut in and would like to be here, but they're just unable. But I'm talking about the nominal Christian, the Christian who maybe just got wet in the baptismal pool and then went right back to living a life of sin. There'll be lost people in the church. Number two, even though limited, man cannot see all the bad that are in the church. The Lord one day will make that eternal separation. And we may be a bit surprised. Someone's did the little fantasy of, I dreamt I went to heaven and I saw somebody there that I was surprised that they were there. And they said, oh, we're surprised to see you here. So that's something that can run both ways. But there'll be no mistakes made on Judgment Day. No one will go to heaven that does not have God's grace and mercy covering their sins, that we can stand in His righteousness, not any righteousness of our own. We can do everything just so and still be considered unprofitable servants. And the third and final lesson will be this. No fish were taken into the vessel or vessels, heaven, that were not first in the church. The church is our training ground for heaven. And you know, if people don't like the church, I don't think they're going to like heaven. So we need to love the church. We need to love being together. And church membership is a prerequisite for heavenly membership. Ephesians chapter 4 and verse 4. To be in that one body, the church. And so we want to encourage people to stay faithful, keep walking in the light, and be what the Lord would have you to be. Well, I see our time is gone. I am favored by your kind attention every Sunday, and I appreciate it so much. We'll see you next Sunday.